All right, welcome. This is now our sixth in a series of semi-annual story slams. For those who don't know me, I'm Doug Reifler. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Affairs and Medical Humanities. And we're here once again, I think, to prove the Temple is a storied place, very well storied. Hopefully we have an exciting line of storytellers ready for tonight. And our host and story inspirer of the school, self-described story machine, as Mike Vitez is here to explain a little about the rules and how things will run. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Reifler. Welcome everybody it is our sixth Temple Story Slam. Hard to believe. I hope everybody is well fed. I know that Tierra Colombiana is such great food, and usually there's none left, so let's keep that record intact, get seconds. Temple is an amazing place. You see and experience extraordinary things here, and it's so wonderful to take the opportunity to just, as Naomi Rosenberg, with Dr. Reifler, a partner in crime here, likes to say, metabolize your experiences. This is a great opportunity to process, reflect, share, make sense of, and give meaning to the extraordinary things we see and do in this building and across the street and all across Temple Health. And me, I am a storyteller. That's all I've ever done in my life is tell stories. I really believe in stories. I believe stories heal. I believe stories inspire. I believe stories bring people together like this. And I believe stories can change the world. And I believe loving stories and listening to stories and sharing stories will make you a better doctor and a better healthcare provider, whatever it is that you do. And I want to thank some people. I really need to begin by thanking Dr. Kaiser, who hired me and has been so supportive. And I don't know if he's here tonight, but I just wanted publicly to thank him. I want to thank Dr. Daly, who's back, and welcome, and for his support, and welcome him back, and I'm glad he's here. I want to thank you guys, the students and the doctors who participate in this and who come out and support it. It's so gratifying and rewarding to see the Temple community embrace what we're doing in our narrative medicine program. The rules here are really that there are no rules. Okay, the people are going to come up here and they're going to tell a story. They're going to tell a story from the heart. They have 5 minutes. There's a timer here. There is a grace period if they go over 5, but not too much over 5. And most of them will stick to 5 minutes. And that's a really hard and easy thing, to tell a story in 5 minutes. You have to get to the guts of it and get in it and get out of it. This is really a celebration of stories and not a competition, but we like to give nominal prizes to the winners. So at the end, we like audience participation. So at the end, you'll see your little program with stories 1 through 12, storytellers 1 through 12. You will get an index card like this at the end, and you each get to vote. So if you like storyteller number 7, write a 7 on your index card, pass it forward. Our judges will be counting them up, and we'll give out our modest but wonderful prizes to the winners. But really, everybody here is a winner. At the end of the celebration, I'm going to invite the storytellers down for a photo. Everybody who tells a story, come back down. And I think while the judges are counting the numbers, we'll open it up to questions and comments from the audience. We've never done that before, but if you have questions of somebody who's a storyteller or a comment, we'll just do a little of that. I think that's it. We're all good to go. I want you all to be very supportive. It's very brave. These people up here, they're bearing their hearts and souls. And I tell them all it's a home crowd of their peers and colleagues. So give them a lot of support. I also have to say that one of our presenters, Dr. Palamarchik, is not here tonight. I'm very sad about that. He has a great story to tell, but he's going to come back in the spring. He's home in bed sick. So we just skip number 8 and keep moving. All right. So our first storyteller tonight is Bishak Comet, doctor. in radiology, and his story tonight is lessons learned at 30,000 feet and on the ground. Dr. Comet, here we go.
All right, I hope everybody can hear me. So I got onto a plane going to Air India, and just before getting on a plane, I was a medical student sitting with a ER doc from the United States. And so I got on this plane, you got the ER doc in one area, and I'm sitting next to a clergyman. And we're over the Atlantic Ocean, 30,000 feet in the air, right? And you got this announcement. It's like a movie coming in real life. Doctor, please come to the back of the airplane. And, if anybody knows me, my instincts were to jump up and go back. But then I said, you know what, just relax, calm down, I'm a medical student. I don't want to get myself into any trouble. Just relax and enjoy the vacation. Nobody got up. Second announcement, come to the back. This time I'm thinking the ER doc should be getting up. I'm a medical student. The third time announcement comes up. Now I've got the clergyman hitting me in my rib cage to try to tell me to get up. By now he knows I'm not only a medical, he also knows my social security number, my full name. So at this point I go back, and now all of a sudden become like Superman. I got my cape, I'm running back, I got adrenaline rushing. It's like a movie come true, right? So I go to the back, and guess what happens? They go, I'm sorry, where's your ID? And this is where, moms are always right. Mom, believe it or not, told me, pack my ID. You never know you'll need it. I swear, it's a true story. And so I go back, and all of a sudden, the whole crowd is like frowning because I'm going back. Then I grab my ID from the suitcase, and I'm going back, and all of a sudden, everybody's smiling again. It's amazing how perspective just changes by the second. So here I am, back in the curtains open up. So I show my ID, and the person's got chest pain. Okay, so I'm a medical student, mind you. 30,000 feet in the air, Atlantic Ocean. It's just setting the tone again. So the thing is, I'm over there, and so, they got like a 2-lead EKG, I kid you not. I say, okay, hook them up to the EKG, let's go. And so by that time, thank God, by that time, the ER doc realizes that she better get up. So she gets up with the stethoscope, comes to examine the patient. Everything is good. I say, he's feeling great. I say, you know what? Why don't you have a seat, give the man some water. He felt better. I go back, I got my blessings from the clergyman. Now let's get back down to earth again. Friday evening, temple reading room, right? I'm reading a PET CT, and we got a resident who says, Doc, take a look at this. As soon as I look at it, I know it's bad news. You got a brain bleeder, and on PET CT, outpatient in the Friday evening. And we're having a hard time getting in touch with doc, so I got one resident calling for the patient, one resident calling, to get the doc, where we're calling the outpatient imaging center. This is all happening Friday evening. Ultimately, we get in touch with the patient, and I start talking to the patient. I say, you better go to the ER, right? The patient's in the restaurant. I kid you not. This is what the patient says to me. Listen, I really love your explanation. I'm having this wonderful meal. May I please finish it? And I kid you not, in the middle of that, I'm thinking, maybe I should let this person, and I said, no, CYA, get him to the ED. So we get him to the ED. By that time, the referring doc has spoken with the patient, etc., and down to the ED. I kid you not, as a radiologist, that night, I lost a lot of sleep because I was really worried for this patient. I want to make sure that the patient's taken care of. This was a recent story, and I'm telling you, I lost a lot of sleep that night. And when I checked back the next morning, I found out that the patient had stage 4 hemorrhagic met. In retrospect, I could have let the person have a meal, but I thought I did the right thing. So let's go back up, 30,000 feet in the air. Pilot announces, thank you for helping this patient, the person on the plane. And I kid you not, the steward came over, and I think she gave me what sounded like a gazillion miles for trying to help. And I didn't even know what the heck we're talking. I told her, listen, I didn't do this to gain miles. I did this because I wanted to take care of somebody in that situation. And I said, I don't want any miles. And in retrospect, I probably should have taken the miles. So, I go out, and something happened that's the greatest, as I'm going down outside, you have international flight, you have all these people walking out, and I kid you not, every single one of them thanked me, said, namaste, thank you. It was one of the best moments in my life. I'll never forget it, never forget it. So 3 lessons, up in the air or on the ground, right? Number 1, collective effort. Good things happen when we have a collective effort. Think of all the residents. Think of all those people on the plane, right? Number two, little things matter in the most difficult of circumstances. Let me remind you, can I have my lobster, right? Stage 4 metastatic disease to the brain, right? Just put that in perspective. And number three, seize the opportunity. Be prepared for opportunities. You never know you're going to be the hero, but take it when that chance comes. Because today, that opportunity that I got to be the hero on the plane will never come back, and I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. Carpe diem, live the day. God bless. Thank you.
Dr. Comet, thank you for starting us off so well. Really appreciate it. Number two, second-year medical student, Jen Urich, front row seat. Come on down, Jen.
Hi, y'all. My name's Jen. I'm horrified to be up here today, so please enjoy all of my thoughts and feelings from a year ago, okay? All right. I had a front row seat to your death, what many would consider a coveted spot. I could see it all. Peers would call me lucky, wish they had my place in that trauma bay as a first-year medical student. I watched as the staff wheeled the gurney in, your limp form pulsating with the rhythmic pounding of chest compressions. I watched as they cut your clothes off your body, as they tossed your boots aside, one landing directly at my feet. I could see your feet too, calloused with the many miles you've walked this earth. I had a front row seat to your death. Can I get some lights? I heard shouted from the throng of people hovering over your bed. The lights went on. The real show began. I watched as they inserted needles, tubes, IV lines, trying to tether you to life. I stared at the rhythmic squeezing of the ambu bag. 1, 2, 3, 4, squeeze. It felt comforting in the midst of the orchestrated chaos of the trauma team as they scrambled to stop your bleeding. I had a front row seat to your death. I've never seen a red so red. It coated the overhead light handles, it splattered on the floor, it pulled underneath you, but you would never know it. They sliced open your left chest. Crank it, the attending ordered as they inserted the cold metallic rib spreaders exposing your very vitality. I have a finger in his aorta, shouted a resident, attempting to clog the hole the bullets had left behind. I had a front row seat to your death. I watched as they held your heart in their hands, squeezing it for you, trying to pump life back into you. All right. That's it. Call it. Time of death, 1:36 p.m. I had a front row seat to your death. The show ended as abruptly as it begun. Gowns and masks were ripped off, thrown away as the trauma team trickled out of the bay. You still lay there, staring at the ceiling, mouth agape. When the resident called me, "Med student, get over here," I felt eagerness and morbid curiosity. She showed me the entry and exit points of your gunshot wounds. I examined your shredded aorta and your torn heart. They showed me how to perform cardiac massage on your lifeless heart. I had a front row seat to your death. "Are you okay?" a resident in fourth year asked me. "I'm fine," I replied with a sickening cackle. My attending that I had shadowed praised me for keeping such a calm demeanor and clear head. You were close to my own age. I left the hospital, exhausted, with tales of my adventures in the ER. You left in a body bag. I had a front row seat to your death. While I watched you die, I felt a thrill of excitement, of eagerness, of curiosity. Sorry. I didn't think I was gonna do this, so I'm really sorry. All right, and here we go. We're gonna do this together. I felt a thrill of excitement, of eagerness, of curiosity. I stood on my tiptoes, craning my neck to get a better look at your exposed heart. I can't do this. After your death was called, I was thrilled when the resident beckoned me over to prod and probe your wounds and to inspect your open thorax more closely. When the resident in fourth year asked me if I was okay, I most certainly responded with, "Yes, I'm fine." But in that moment, it would admit to that weakness. I can't do this. Sorry. This really gets me going, and I don't know why. Well, yeah, I know why. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we go. It's not as if I could simply break down in the middle of the emergency department, but I can break down here. So I laughed. In that moment, I could simply not even comprehend your death or what it meant to witness it in such close proximity. My friends, when I told them bluntly, I watched a man die today, clamored for more details, soaking up my words that still dripped with your blood. I've been shadowing on weekend nights just to see a big trauma like that, and you get one on your first day of shadowing on a Tuesday afternoon? No fair. One exclaimed, I was envied for my position in that trauma bay to see something so rare and graphic as your cardiac massage. But that is the danger of compartmentalization. We fail to see your humanity, and along the way we lose our own. I'm sorry. I had a front row seat to your death. You were my first death. Our world intersected for only 10 minutes, and now I can't stop thinking about you. I still see your face. You have never known me, but I cried over your death in the twilight corridors of the subway. I think of you most often. I was praised for having such little reaction to your death, but now it's all I can do not to cry in the subway on the way home from the hospital. I feel such visceral guilt and shame. It's the strangest dichotomy. I feel such guilt at my excitement during your death and my post-mortem curiosity. How can any decent person feel that way as they watch someone die? I actively sought to see your horrible wounds and wished some of your trauma team would move a little to the left so I could see your gaping chest. I even had the audacity to feel annoyed when an attending stood at the very foot of your bed directly in front of me, blocking the view. At the same time, I feel shame in my thoughts and reactions when I'm alone. I feel weak and overwhelmed for these human reactions. I feel shame for feeling this way, especially when so many others wish that they could have had my front row seat. I feel shame for wanting another experience like this. After I finish shadowing, I sign myself right back up to shadow again. I like the quick thinking, I like the chaos, and I like the high. I'm done now.
Way to go, Jen. Wow. Wow. Okay, thank you so much. Following that, we have Dr. Maruti Kumaran in radiology. Do doctors believe in miracles? So, Dr. Kumaran.
It's a miracle I'm stood here because as I was walking down, a lot of people said, well, that's a tough act to follow. I believe that. Well done. Just to lighten the mood a little, I'm Maruti, I'm one of the radiologists. I'm married to an obstetrician. So this is to talk about a couple of incidents back in my life and then previous job. So miracles basically, when you look up the dictionary, it talks about ordinary events which have no scientific explanation. And we as professionals always like to have an explanation for things, or at least be reassured that there is some explanation somewhere on a Wikipedia page or Google. That's what I do. So this is basically to talk about a couple of incidents back in my previous job where, as a radiologist, I encountered this lady called Sue, who used to work as a locum tech, which means she did a few weeks here and there. And once she found out that my wife is an obstetrician, she wanted to know if she knew somebody who was an infertility expert. And the reason was they'd been married for 6 years and they would like to have a baby. I said, fine, I can get that done. And I went on to narrate something that had happened prior in my early life, which is in a similar vein. So this was when I had just graduated as a physician, and my folks were very proud of me until I chose radiology. They got really confused. And the reason for that is I graduated in early 90s, and we actually had radios. So for those kids who don't know what radios are, these used to be these big boxes that you actually tuned in to listen to music and news. And they got very confused because I wouldn't be wearing a stethoscope or a white coat, or even didn't have a blood pressure component. They said, are you a doctor? I said, yeah. What do? You don't even have a steth. Oh, I do fancy stuff like, scans and procedures, and they were not very impressed. But that didn't stop me, or them at least, to consult me because I practically was their family physician. So they'd call me like, I got a headache, what should I do? Oh, take paracetamol. I got cramps and headache. Oh, I don't know, take paracetamol and Imodium. The neighbor has cramps, what should she do? Take paracetamol and Imodium. Luckily, she consulted a real doctor and turned out, she had a ruptured ectopic, she survived. But then you can't help them from consulting you. You're the doctor in the family. So they would get me in touch with this cousin of ours who had been married for 12 years and didn't have a baby, and they were obviously very keen to have a child. I said, that's fine. We knew somebody who ran an infertility clinic and had her own setup. So she said, well, we'll run all these tests, and one of those tests is going to be HSG, which is like a contrast that we inject into the womb and test for the fallopian tube patency. I said, fine, we can do that. And she said, before we do that, we should do an ultrasound. I said, sure. And that's something I could do. So we got this lady into my clinic, and I put the probe on the belly with my wife stood behind me and a few other people. There's no HIPAA there. There are a lot of people who stood there, not even related to us. But the moment I put the probe on, there was a baby on the screen. I couldn't believe it. So I quickly shut down the machine, switched it on again. I thought, must be the previous patient. And then tried again, and then again, the baby was still there. And I couldn't believe it. And when you do ultrasounds, the people are basically looking at your face very intently because they're reading your expressions. And I don't know what she read. She got shocked out of her wits. I said, what are you looking at? I said, I don't know. There's a baby there. She said, she said, what? That's not possible. I said, I don't know. These things don't lie. Look at this. I showed her the baby, the head. The baby was about 2 months old already. I could see the heartbeat, and she couldn't believe it. And within a few seconds, there's crying, there's hugging. People who don't know us are hugging us. And I was practically picking up my jaw from the floor and snapping it back on. And I'm proud to say that baby that I saw that day is a 22-year-old former student now. And after having narrated the story to Sue, I forgot all about it, and I didn't see Sue for a long time. I think then about a year and a half later, I ran into her in a shopping complex, and I said, "Hey Sue, I didn't see you. What happened?" And she said, "I don't know. I spoke to you, and then I had a baby." I'm not making this up. And I only spoke to her, by the way, and I couldn't believe it. So, and and then that kind of reinforced that we encounter these as medical professionals. We see extraordinary events. These are ordinary events which have such a profound impact on people's lives in a positive way, and we should be privileged and we should be thankful that our profession allows us to participate and share these experiences with people that we encounter with. So miracles, whatever the definition is, I don't care. Maybe there is an explanation somewhere out on Google. But for these two events, I really don't want to check because I want to believe that these are miraculous and I want to live with it for the rest of my life. Thank you so much.
These stories are all so wonderful, and you gotta love the variety of stories that you get at a story slam. So number 4 tonight is a fourth-year medical student, Carrie Ann Finnegan, with My Heart. Come on down, Carrie Ann. I feel like I'm on a talk show.
So this comes from earlier this year while I was on my surgery rotation. And I wrote this because, well, I needed to, and because I don't want to forget. A young woman came into the thoracic surgery clinic with her parents, eager for answers. She had enlarged lymph nodes in her chest and recent unintentional weight loss. The concern for malignancy was high. So she was to return the next day for procedure to biopsy the lymph nodes. The residents told me this would be an interesting case to watch. I had never seen a mediastinoscopy before. Unfortunately, I had missed the beginning because of lecture, but I ran straight there to catch the tail end. I stood behind the head of the bed and I watched as they took samples of her massive Station 4 lymph node. After collecting enough biopsies, the scope was removed from her neck. Final hemostasis was the last step before closing the minor incision above her sternal notch. Seconds later, a rocket of bright red came spewing straight up out of the patient's neck. Literally straight up. My heart skipped a beat. Quickly, the surgeon's finger pressed against the vessel stopped the bleeding momentarily, but every time he tried to lift it, blood came pouring out. Pressure was held, and everyone in the room was silent. Then the OR phone rang. The frozen pathology results. Positive for carcinoma. My heart fell to the floor. Tears started to well in my eyes, and my head couldn't quite comprehend what was happening, but I grabbed the cross around my neck and I prayed. The only thing I knew to do in that moment. Red was everywhere now, their gloves dripping, their shoes stained, even their masks spotted red. I was shaking, but I scrubbed in, thinking maybe they would need another set of hands. Stupid me. I soon realized my inexperienced hands would be of no use. With this finger still holding pressure, the attending called for the other thoracic and cardiac surgeons, and then quite suddenly 30 people filled OR 5. The next thing I knew, they called for a sternotomy saw to open her chest. It was all I could do to hold back tears as I stood there remembering the pathology report. All of this to find out she has cancer. My heart broke. I left the hospital that night at 9 p.m. after she was transferred to the surgical ICU, still intubated, still sedated. I drove home crying, still shaking and grasping for hope. That day I visited her room and saw her parents, their eyes red and heavy, their voices hoarse. She was still intubated and sedated. I don't think she even knew I was there. But I held her hand as I talked with her parents. I could tell they were grateful to see a familiar face. I cautiously answered some of their questions, not knowing what to say. I wasn't sure how to comfort them. What do you say to parents whose child had a stroke while being diagnosed with cancer? My words seemed beyond inadequate. But something came over me, and I asked them if I could pray for them. With gratitude, they accepted. I crouched down next to where they were sitting, put my hand across her mom's back, and prayed. Over the next few days, I visited them at least twice a day. The team swept by quickly every morning, but I lingered to make sure they were okay. I came back every afternoon, sometimes evening. I felt helpless. I was a third-year medical student who had never been in an ICU before. I didn't have any answers, but I was there. I was present. I listened, I comforted, I held their hands, and I prayed. With time, she improved, and I was there when she left the unit and came to the floor. She could smile and squeeze back as I held her hand. She continued to have some weakness and word-finding difficulties, but not long after, she was well enough to transition to rehab. On the day of discharge, I went to see my patient and say goodbye. It took her a few long minutes to find the words, and I could tell she wanted to say more. But she looked at me with a big smile and said thank you. As I was heading to the elevator, her parents were arriving and stopped me. Her mom embraced me in a hug with tears running down her cheek and said, "Thank you so much for what you've done for us. You're going to make a wonderful doctor." Sometimes this world of medicine will shake you to the core and break your heart. Sometimes it won't make any sense and you'll want nothing to do with it because the hurt is just too much. Sometimes there will be nothing you can do to change the diagnosis. But what I realized is when you show up, when you care, when you listen, when you take an extra moment to hold a hand, people notice and it makes a difference. What a gift it was to be a source of comfort and consistency for a family experiencing crisis, for them and for me. Amid a grueling surgery rotation, I was graciously reminded of why I was called to medicine. Compassion matters. It matters for our patients and it matters for ourselves. So show up, be present, listen, hold a hand. You're going to make a wonderful doctor if you do.
What an impressive group of people. Unbelievable. Thank you. All these stories are wonderful. And the string will continue. Next up is Pam Vasquez, a certified recovery specialist at Episcopal, with her story, What About Jesse? Come on down, Pam.
My friend just gave me tissues because I always cry when I do something like this, but I don't think I'm going to need them. Good evening. I was laying out the lunch buffet at the grocery store where I worked. I remember the smell of fried chicken and the sound of the Bangles' Manic Monday playing overhead. But all I could think about was my daughter Kelly, who had just overdosed and died 3 weeks earlier, 10 days before her 21st birthday. I went outside to smoke a cigarette and figure out how I could kill myself. I had become sober myself 3 years prior and had experienced such a profound change that drinking or using a drug to ease my suffering was not even a thought. Killing myself seemed like the only way out. Deep inside, I knew this was wrong. So, on my cigarette break, I called a dear friend. She said 3 words that saved me. What about Jesse? In the fog of my pain, I couldn't even see how important it was for me to go on for my younger daughter, Jessica, who was just 10, until my friend pointed it out. Jesse became my reason to live. I was raised by wonderful parents. I went to a private school. I had a really happy upbringing, but still I turned to drugs at an early age. It was fun at first. I functioned fine for a really long time. And then I didn't. I lost everything. I lost my car, my job, my home. Most importantly, I lost my children. I'm sure it looked like I just walked away from them, but I had actually embarked on a journey to go get clean. It was a long 7-year trip. Making amends is part of the 12-step process that helped me recover. I started with my children. At the time, Kelly was 18 and lived with her father. Jessica was 7 and lived with her grandparents. Kelly was angry, and I had to be brutally honest with her and allow her to be brutally honest with me. It was horribly painful, but it fostered healing. Kelly slowly forgave me, but she was already heavily into drinking and drugs. I couldn't reach her. I couldn't help her. Maybe I was too late. Maybe I was the last person she wanted to listen to. Not only did Kelly have the problem of addiction, she had a mental health diagnosis as well. This dual diagnosis for her was so difficult. In the end, addiction won. Or was it mental illness? Does it matter? When I reconnected with Jessie, as I said, she was only 7, living with her grandparents. I had to show her that I was back for good. My words carried little weight. She and her grandparents had heard them all before. So I took 2 buses. This is just an example. I took 2 buses every single Tuesday, rain, sleet, freezing, hot, it didn't matter, every Tuesday to go do homework with my 7-year-old daughter, just to show my consistency. And about after a year, Jessie began to understand that I was always going to show up. And then we flash forward about 10 years, and I began to notice behaviors in Jessie that looked familiar. They were the same behaviors I had seen in Kelly. I was present this time, and I acted. Jessica was diagnosed with a mental health disorder as well. The early intervention seems to have worked. Proper medication and support helped. Jessica no longer drinks or uses drugs. She is now in her sophomore year of college, and last spring she even made the dean's list in her freshman year. I did not go through all of this to fry chicken for a lunch buffet. There had to be a bigger plan for me. So a few years ago, I started searching. I was offered a job at a recovery house. I did some more work in the addiction field and completed my certified recovery specialist certification. I now work at the Episcopal campus of Temple University Hospital under a program called ROSE. This stands for Recovery Overdose Survivor Engagement. I engage with overdose survivors in the emergency department. I couldn't save my own daughter, but I am helping to save some other mother's children. One of these such stories is I had a girl, she was 21, she was homeless, she was hopeless. She had overdosed and been revived. When I shared with her that I was a heroin addict in recovery and had lost a child her age, she finally looked at me. She could see that I understood the pain and desperation she was feeling. I cried with her. I showed her my vulnerability, and that seemed to break down the wall around her. I knelt down and put my hands on her knees. This is the last day you ever have to go hungry, I told her. You never have to be homeless again. At this, she finally wept. We wept together. After a night in the crisis response center, a bed in a treatment center was found for her in the morning. She would not get into the transport van until she could give me a hug and thank me. She now has a job and a place to live, and we still keep in touch. I like to quote Gloria Steinem, the final stage of healing is using what happens to you to help other people. Thank you.
Hooray for you, Pam. Thank you for sharing that. Next up, Dr. Mary Morrison, psychiatry. My improbable mentor quotes Osler.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, this is particularly poignant because my mentor was hospitalized as a patient this past weekend, doing very well, but I got to visit him. I wrote this a few months ago. When you first see them, do you know who will be your mentor and change your life? I didn't recognize him then. I am a tired medical intern wearing faded green scrubs that are too big. Scrubs weren't made for women then. Talking to a nurse on an inpatient unit, I hadn't had any coffee yet. What are we going to do about our patient? She's thirsty. Thirsty in a way that I had never seen before. She's searching all over her hospital room, looking for liquid to drink. We had to lock the bathroom when we caught her proceeding to drink from the toilet. How are we going to help this polydipsic woman? I just feel powerless before her turbocharged thirst. Then he appears, upright in his posture, military background. He's in the room talking with my patient, looking every bit the calm, wise, seasoned consultant. He knows how to connect with this pressured woman. He can interpret her language. To me, she's speaking gibberish, but her words connect and have meaning to him. Is there sunlight peeking in the room now? She is psychogenic polydipsia, a new diagnosis of schizophrenia. We have a treatment plan and she gets better. My mentor-to-be becomes my teacher as I refocus my career. I'm an internist who's learning to be a psychiatrist. I can resuscitate people with lethal arrhythmias. I do that well. He shows me the way to sit with a patient who has a large black emptiness inside. This patient fabricates an illness. Her fabrication is elaborate and it's compelling. And I struggle to understand her captivating talents and her treacherous inner world. My mentor helps me grasp my painful response to being her physician, sustaining my cheerful self while healing lethal inside darkness will take longer to learn than arrhythmia care. My mentor is my boss, and I'm an academic attending, and I want to study depression in older women. I'm pregnant. I have my much-wanted first child. No one, of course, has been pregnant in the department for decades. No one knows what to do with a pregnant, aspiring clinician scientist. My mentor covers my responsibilities, my clinical responsibilities, as well as his own, and I write and write and write. And the day I submit my grant is my due date. A day later, I have a new son. 6 weeks later, my mentor helps to cover my professional responsibilities as I ease back into my 2 full-time jobs. And I get my grant and I'm NIH funded. My happy situation takes me away from my mentor. And while my research goes well, the nourishing environment I had is lacking, and I find I need to leave academic medicine for a while. So once a month, we see complicated outpatients together. We teach residents, we laugh and smile and talk. And then I'm back in academic medicine, the decades roll by. It's really hard to know how to honor an esteemed mentor, someone who's so important to you. He's a modest man, but he agrees to a portrait, and he now has a portrait that reflects his dignity and professionalism. I know he likes it. The portrait also comes at the same time as a threatening medical diagnosis. I like to think that it contributed to his resilience. This summer, he sent me a book that he wrote on consultation liaison psychiatry. On page 15, he has a much-loved quote from William Osler about the attributes of an excellent physician: availability, affability, and ability, in that order. This past weekend, we shared a lovely meal together, wine glasses clinking frequently, overlooking the dashing Delaware River. A hidden chapter is clarified how an aspiring surgeon became a psychiatrist. About to be drafted to Vietnam while a surgical intern, he was sitting in the hospital cafeteria with his head in his hands, looking upset. The psychiatry chair spotted him and said if my mentor was willing to switch to psychiatry, he could have his Vietnam service deferred during his residency. So the surgeon was transmuted and a psychiatrist was recruited. What if I failed to notice him years ago? Missed his encouragement, missed his friendship. Mentors can appear as unlikely figures and stay with you, cherished for the rest of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. All right, next up, a third-year medical student, Atilio Tito Atencio, M3, first day on trauma call. Tito, here you go.
All right, hey guys, I am terrified up here. Also, Jen, you killed it. We need to get together. This is going to be a very similar story, except you wrote it better, so I might need some pointers later. All right, guys, so first day on trauma call by Tito. So it was the first day on call of my trauma rotation, and I finally felt like one of the cool kids. I get to see all kinds of surgeries and life-saving procedures. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was anxious. But as I was sitting in the cafeteria, chatting with a group of residents I would soon look up to immensely. We were in the middle of plain conversation, probably something unimportant like life outside the hospital, when the blast of simultaneous phone alarms signaled it was time to leave. Everyone stood up at once, picking up their barely finished lunches to throw away as we hurried to the trauma bay. The alert read, Cat 1, male, GSW by police. I spent a brisk walk to the ED trying to decipher what those three letters meant. The trauma bay is smaller than I thought. The trauma bay is small, I thought as I walked in. Emergency medicine docs stood ready with their blue gowns, gloves, hairnets, and face masks. I was the last of the group to don the uniform. I could barely contain the exhilaration I felt. The double doors leading to the outside world opened wide to let our next case in. The patient was a male who appeared to be in his mid-20s, 2 gunshot wounds to the left chest. He was rolled in on a stretcher with bright blood-red sheets. The team transferred him onto the pristine trauma bed and got to work. Amidst the controlled confusion, I could no longer tell who hid behind the masks. 2 people in blue began cutting off clothes, while another 2 held out the patient's arms, working on getting IV access. A tall blue individual stood to the left of the patient, yelling out what he saw. GSW ×2 to the left chest, followed by, the patient has a pulse. He looked to the person at the foot of the bed for direction. That's a thoracotomy, said the chief resident, who I recognized by the superhero surgical cap. People left and right, all with meticulously practiced roles, began doing everything they could to save the patient. I couldn't help but grin underneath my mask as I witnessed the most chaotic, yet perfectly choreographed performance I had ever seen. It was the first day on call of my trauma rotation, and I finally felt like one of the cool kids. I was able to see a clamshell thoracotomy. Doctors dressed in blue, now drenched in red, were pressing on a human heart just seconds earlier with their experienced hands. I had never witnessed something as remarkable, astonishing, or fascinating. But things calmed. The controlled chaos came to an end, and silence set in. Hey, Tito, could you close them up? The chief asked me. The other resident will show you how. I got to approach the trauma bed. I saw the patient once again laying on a bright blood-red sheet. I could see both his lungs, esophagus, his aorta, his vena cavas, and what was left of his motionless heart. Somehow, this was less cool than just a minute before. Make sure that you do a good job. His family's here to identify him. And it all said it at once. The body in front of me was more than an object of exciting procedures. The patient had been a young and otherwise healthy-looking man with deep, dark brown eyes and gentle features that made him approachable even in death. I could have passed him on the street that same day, or maybe he could have been a close friend, possibly even a relative. He was a person with friends, family, dreams, all the things that I still have. It took everything in me to not cry in front of the resident as I worked closing his chest. I exited the bay, leaving behind a red shoe print with every step. It was a little after 3 p.m., and I went straight to the on-call room. There was no way I could be in the same room with his family as my chief gave him the terrible news. I mean, how could I? Moments earlier, I was longing for action. I was grinning with excitement at seeing their loved one's chest ripped open. He was a human like you or me, and I didn't see it until he was gone. I sat on the bed, filled with shame and regret. I'd like to think that in some chaos, or in the chaos of trauma, there's still enough time to appreciate the patient for what they are, a person. My phone alarm went off, Cat 2, female, MVC.
Really, thank you all so much so far, and we have, I think, 4 more to go. So next up, I guess, is number 9, an M2, Jillian Saldana, Time. Where is she? All right, Jillian.
Hi, everyone. So this is called Time. I was standing in my freshman dorm room when my mom called, crying. How could this happen to someone a second time? She had been treated for breast cancer 5 years earlier and had been in remission, but gone back for a CT scan and follow-up tests ever since. She'd just gone in for annual testing. This time it revealed that she had stage 4 endometrial cancer. She went through 4 more rounds of chemo, surgery, still more chemo. Follow-up scans showed no more remaining cancer cells. Things were looking up. 6 months later, the cancer was back. My mom was only 50. The doctors decided surgery did not make sense. It had already spread into her liver. They gave her more rounds of chemo instead. And on the last one, her 16th round since the first time she got cancer, she coded. They saved her life, but we knew at that point, no more treatment. About a year later, I was home from college for spring break. My parents were in the ER. "Hi, Jill," my mom said to me softly. She was sitting in a wheelchair, hunched over in pain, and could only lightly press my hand. When I got home, my brother Gavin finally admitted to me, "It's not looking good." After a long pause, I asked the question I never wanted to ask, even when it was burning in the back of my mind. "How long?" 3 months, he whispered. I stared at the ceiling, and my tears rolled off the side of my face until sleep took over. My parents decided to do hospice care. I was going to college away from home and flew back every 2 to 3 weeks. Each time, my mom was worse. During one visit, she was connected to an oxygen tank. The next visit, she had stopped eating and was bedridden. The following time, she had stopped drinking water, and her skin had turned a slate green. She pressed a small sponge shaped like a popsicle over her lips as a sole source of moisture. The 3 months mark approached. My mom weighed less than 80 pounds and could only whisper, "I love you," to us over and over. Every night for a week, we thought it would be her last. I wanted more time with her, but I was also begging for it to end. On June 20th, 2016, my mom took her last breath, surrounded by my immediate family and her mom. Her labored breathing stopped. It finally felt real. My mom wrote an email that she asked my dad to send to her family and friends after she passed. The subject line was, "Until we meet again." She wrote, "No one likes suffering, but it is what makes us tough and makes us stop and think about who we are." Throughout her life, and especially towards the end, She remained optimistic, caring, and able to deal with whatever unexpected hurdles she faced. These are many of the characteristics I hope to show as a physician. When the stress of med school gets to me, and when I wonder why I chose to do this, I think about her and all the people in medicine who helped her. I think about her surgeons who continued to visit her in the hospital years after they were responsible for her care. I think about the emails her doctors sent, having done the best they could but wishing they could have done more. In the most difficult moments, her doctors were a source of knowledge and strength. I think about the lasting impact physicians are able to have, not only on patients, but on their families, even if we can't help them the way we want to. My mom always encouraged me to do the best that I could, whether or not it led to the results I was hoping for. I remember that now, while in school, and I will remember that later on with my patients. Despite the ups and downs that will inevitably occur, it really is a privilege to be on this side of medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Jillian. Next up we have another M2, Rachel Smith, with her story, Post-Operation Weight Chart. Come on down, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I wrote this about my dad. So here we go. For years, I've told all of my friends that my dad was pretty much Liam Neeson from Taken. The movie is about a girl who travels to Europe with her friends and is kidnapped, and her father does everything to get his baby girl home safe. That was my dad. He would do anything for me. He would send me "Good morning, bunny honey, daddy loves you" texts every morning and call me every night just to hear what I learned that day in med school. He'd cry at birthday and Father's Day cards. He didn't ask for help because he didn't believe he ever needed it. And on the rarest occasion that he did ask, and if you hesitated in just an instant, he'd get angry. And I think that's because it was just too hard for him to ask in the first place. A year ago, my dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. Prior to his diagnosis, my dad had lost over 60 pounds. He couldn't swallow due to the obstruction in his esophagus, and when he was diagnosed, he needed to go through chemo and radiation, which could lead to more weight loss, so my dad's doctors placed a feeding tube. On top of chemo and radiation each day, every week was filled with new feeding tube issues and infections. Despite all these issues, he never let anyone know how much he was suffering. My dad had his resection surgery on January 21st. He was released from the hospital on January 28th, and he died February 4th, just 2 weeks after his surgery. Here's the thing. His death was totally unnecessary. My parents had been divorced since I was 3, but my mom helped him more than anyone else. But with all of us living separately, my mom and I didn't know that the home care nurses were only coming every 3rd day. And I was studying for a cardiopulmonary exam, and I wasn't checking in on him as much as I should have. The last time I saw my dad, he was walking towards me, proud that he was on his 4th lap around the step-down unit, smiling and joking with the nurses that he was starting bids for him to be the next bachelor. He sent me a text after his release. "Good morning, bunny honey. This exam? Chewed up raw and spit it out. You're the best. I love you. XOXO." After my test, the night of the Super Bowl, the night before he died, I texted him, "It's a boring game." My dad was a huge sports fan, and his text back was only 2 words: "Was asleep." I should have known. The next day, worried that we hadn't heard from him, my mom went to check in and found him on the floor, clearly having suffered from excessive fluid and blood loss. It was horrible, completely unimaginable. There was blood and diarrhea everywhere. At first, I couldn't even react like a daughter, only like a medical student. It was way too painful otherwise. When he died, I had to think of him as if he were a patient vignette. 63-year-old male diagnosed with esophageal cancer presents to the clinic with complaints of pain in his abdomen and around his J-tube, and severe diarrhea and bleeding. Okay, so fluid loss, that can lead to decreased cardiac output, hypotension, hypovolemic shock, and death. It wasn't until a few weeks later while I built up the courage to look through my dad's phone. His last note was titled, Post-Operation Weight Chart. From his release on January 28th up until February 4th, my dad logged his weight every day. In 5 days, he'd lost 7 pounds, down to 115 pounds. He had gained weight after his surgery because he had the correct feeding, but they sent him home with the wrong one. He didn't complain. Nobody noticed. How could he have not known that something was wrong? Why didn't he have the right feeding? Why didn't he have the nurse come more often? Why didn't he call me or my mom or just 911? He must have been scared. I would have been. But it was always just too hard for him to ask for help. It's hard to admit that I'm angry at my dad, but it's true. How did he let himself get to this point? Why didn't he just ask for help? I'm also angry at his medical team. They must not have really known my dad, because if they had, they wouldn't have let him push them away. They would have known he was too proud to ever ask for help. But I'm also mad at myself. I should have done more. Why didn't I force him to go to the doctor months beforehand? I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. But I do know that I want to make sure that no one else's daughter has to ask the questions that I'm asking now. Sharing this now with all of you helps me deal with my own grief, but I also hope sharing this with all of you, my peers and colleagues, can help us learn to become better doctors, nurses, family members. We can perform the fanciest procedures and provide the best medications, but that's not enough. Medicine is as much an art as it is a science. It's not just about a patient's creatinine or glucose levels. It's about truly understanding your patients. I want to truly know my patients and ask myself, can I do more to help them? I also want my patients to feel comfortable asking me for help. As doctors, we have to connect with them, care for them, and follow up with them. And if our patients aren't going to advocate for themselves, we must advocate for them. So as I continue to study microbiology, cardiopulm, and the science of medicine, I'm also going to take the time to learn the art of medicine. I'll continue to grieve about my dad's death, but I hope I can learn from it too and become a better physician because of him. Thank you.
As you can see, it takes such courage for these students to get up here and share some of these stories. So I thank you all for that. In the courage department, up next is an M1, Manan Parek, who's going to tell us a story. You. Come on up, Manan.
Before I start, I just wanted to say, I know I'm an M1, but I just feel so privileged to be here, and honored to share, but also honored to listen to everybody's stories. I just wanted to say, it's been, one, really inspirational and also really exciting because I'm going to be, I guess, in your shoes maybe similarly in the future. And it's just, I'm just I have no regrets. Honestly, this is the greatest thing. So yeah, round of applause for everybody. Yeah, so it's titled You. I met you for the first time in my first week of medical school. There seemed to be an atmosphere of gravity to the moment. We were all seeing the person who was going to teach us about the wonders of the human body. However, I really didn't feel anything at the moment, and it's something about which I felt guilt. How could this not mean anything? In reflecting on that moment, I realized that I did feel something. I felt fear. I felt fearful that I would disrespect your memory by virtue of pulling off your skin and reflecting your muscles. I felt so much fear that any more information as to who you were would make learning from you even more difficult. I hesitated to look at your cause of death, and I hesitated to learn that you lived to be 97 years old. I hesitated to learn that you were a pastor. During dissection on that first day, I remember tying my gown for the first time. I remember feeling a sense of pride and honor with that gown. I still feel pride when I put on that gown. However, more than that, I think I felt distance. I felt comfortable with the distance I had put between us. A pair of scrubs, a gown, and not one, but 2 pairs of gloves. I remember wondering why I couldn't wear gloves and a gown all the time, and not just in lab. I remember wondering why I even felt that way in the first place. The distance I put between us helped me focus on learning from you, and not on what I was doing to you in order to learn from you. That first day of dissection was the first time in a while I asked myself, can I really become a doctor? As time passed, I grew more comfortable with you. I dissected your heart, your life source in a sense. In some ways, the labs were getting more intimate, and I was getting to see parts of you that you hadn't seen yourself. To hold your heart in my hands was everything. And for a moment, I felt more wonder than guilt. I remember not being concerned about using a scalpel anymore. I was amazed at how far I'd come in just a month, emotionally and intellectually. You had already taught me so much, and I was very grateful to you for it. What worried me, however, was how okay I was after each lab. I was getting more and more comfortable ignoring the barbarity of what I was doing to you. With 2 fingers in your left ventricle and following them up to your aorta, wiggling them as to show my classmates the passage of blood throughout the heart, I realized just how detached I was from you. Completely overtaken by my medical curiosity, I overlooked how horribly I was treating you. I looked down at my gown, which was covered in blood and fluid. My scrubs had fluid, and they were on beneath my gown. There was even dry blood in my hair. I didn't freak out. I didn't really care because I had my gown, my gloves, and my goggles. In a sense, they protected me. I think I realized that I needed them more than I had originally thought. As anatomy wound down in the past few weeks, we were studying your head. In a sense, we were being reintroduced. I was really be able to see you without a bag on your face. And in meeting you, I'm sorry I couldn't meet you without my gown. I still wasn't ready. What was different was that I wasn't scared to work with you. I wasn't scared of dishonoring you anymore. And for the first time since medical school started, I felt confident. To be honest, I'm not really sure why I felt this way. I knew what I was about to do to you was horrific. But maybe simply knowing how to cut through your eyes and your face made actually doing it a little bit easier for me to digest. Regardless, it was remarkable to me how removing the bag from your face brought me so much joy, as if I had finally met a distant pen pal. That was a good day. It was weird, though. I felt so familiar with you after having inspected your body, but I knew that I didn't know you. I mean, like, really know. I believe that our brains are who we are. It's where our most precious experiences are kept. It's where our choices were made. And it's what makes us, us. And since I wasn't able to hold your brain, it means I never really held you. But maybe it was a good thing that I didn't get that privilege. Holding your personality in my hands, your memories in my hands, might have been way too much, especially after I had just taken a saw down the middle of your head. I know I never really saw you without a gown on, Of all the bridges I crossed with you emotionally and intellectually, that was just one I couldn't. I still don't know why I need one all the time, or I want one all the time, even when I'm just looking. But thank you for making me ask myself why.
Thank you, Manan. Next year, I'm going to do the Story Slam presentations in order of height, and I'll start with the shortest, and I'll go to the tallest, and it'll be, why didn't I think of that 5 Story Slams ago? Last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Christopher Goodwin, Occupational Health. He's tall, so this is good. A guy and his dog. And remember, after his talk, we're going to have everybody come down and we're going to do the voting. But Christopher, take it away, our finale. Thanks. All right.
I'm not quite that tall. So just real quick, how many of you are M1s? M2s? 3s? 4s? Well, man, hats off to all of you being here. My excitement and passion for being a physician is still immense. I've been a doctor for almost 30 years, been married 1 year longer than that, and my passion for being a physician has never died, and it's been really kindled greatly by being a faculty member at the University of Washington in Seattle for the last few years. I'm new to Temple, and that is an incredibly exciting story, mostly because I followed the most amazing woman in the world across the country. That's for another night. It's a pretty cool story. But this story was inspired by Michael's prompt, his prompt for You Never Know. I love dogs, just not in my exam room when my patient has a very nasty wound, and the only thing worse looking and worse smelling than the wound is the dog. It was 1999 in the Pacific Northwest. I was working in a fledgling inner city clinic serving the uninsured and the homeless. It had been started by a self-described hippie chick whose defense of the underserved was militant. We refused care to no one. So on a cold winter morning when a guy and his dog came in the clinic from a homeless camp saying something was wrong with his foot, but wouldn't let anyone touch him unless his dog stayed at his side, his dog stayed at his side. He looked about 20 years older than the frightened child peeking from the sunken eyes under a low wool skull cap, sucked in skin against his temples and jawline, betraying the emaciation that was otherwise hiding under the multiple layers of clothes. There was the odor of unwashed body, campfire smoke, urine, and the stale, fruity alcohol on his breath. But the dog was worse. It was a black lab shepherd mix, bald spots, oozing sores and crusts, covered in dirt and what looked like blood and grease and smelling like a rotting animal. He rolled in a deer carcass on the way in, Doc, sorry. And his ankle wound was bad. Turns out he'd passed out drunk after shooting up, and a hot ember from his campfire had jumped into his unlaced boot. That was maybe a week ago. He couldn't remember. A filthy sock with a burn hole and a piece of charcoal in his boot told the story. And this wound was bad. It covered the entire outer aspect of his ankle. It had that third-degree burn appearance of dirty candle wax. And the center part was ulcerating and collapsing with necrotic debris, maybe down to the bone. You're going to lose that foot if you don't go to the hospital. Well, I have no one to care for him, he said, looking at his dog. And that dog cares for me. He's never let me down. Everyone else has. Nope, can't do it. So he limped out of the clinic with a bandaged wound, futilely bandaged, a handful of antibiotics, some protein shakes, a new pair of socks, and his dog at his side. A few weeks later, I went with a clinic team on what we'd call river walks. We'd go down to the homeless camps along the Spokane River. It was an absolutely beautiful, sunny, brutally cold day. It was getting late and we were about to turn back. We spotted them. Guy and his dog by a campfire, sitting on this abandoned minivan bench seat. We asked him if we could reassess his wound, and he let us. Miraculously, it really wasn't much worse, but it was definitely not better. We rebandaged it, gave another handful of antibiotics, some more protein shakes, and some more new socks. He invited me to squeeze in next to him on the bench. I sat there for a moment, silent. The slow, deep hush of the Spokane River rolling by. The whispering breeze and the tall Douglas firs and the lodgepole pines just barely swaying. A late afternoon winter sun casting long shadows. It was beautiful. But this dog stunk. There we were, the three of us, crammed side by side on this 2-passenger bench in the middle of the woods, about a mile from the nearest road. Maybe if I could persuade him that I would take care of his dog, he'd go to the hospital. I looked at the dog. The dog looked at me. I was certain that dog was staring at me, daring me to explain to my wife what I was about to do. I started having this conversation in my mind with the dog. Okay, first thing, you need a bath. I could do that, his eyes said. You gotta know, we've got 5 kids, a skinny standard poodle that won't eat around another dog, and this really fat dachshund that eats everything. He kept looking right at me. This was becoming a pretty intense telepathic conversation. Okay, more than that. We have a duck in a diaper that runs around the house, that bullies the dachshund. We have 3 chickens and a horse. So, he shrugged. Wait a minute, dogs don't shrug. What was that the guy said? Apparently our conversation had become audible. So I stood up and I turned to him and I said, look, you're gonna lose that foot. Listen, come back to clinic with us and I'll take your dog home and you can go to the hospital. And he interrupted me. He looked me right in the eye. Doc, you do that? You take care of my dog? He doesn't like most people. He usually bites them. Oh, you tell me that now? And he doesn't even growl at you. It's like you know each other already. Yeah, we were getting to know each other before you interrupted. You do that for me? You take care of my dog? Yeah, we'll work something out. Just come. I hesitated, and he saw it. But he covered for me there by the river. Nah, Doc, you don't need to do that. I'll come by clinic, maybe in a couple days. You know, I've been thinking I might head home to Chicago, go to Mom's. She'll take care of the dog. Then I can go to hospital. I might even go to rehab and get clean. He never came to clinic. I never saw him again. I wondered for a long time after that if he lost the foot or if he was even alive. I couldn't be inconvenienced to take care of a dog, a dirty, foul-smelling dog, but to save a foot, maybe a life. I wish I could say I know I'd make a different decision today. About 6 months later, we got a postcard at the clinic. Chicago skyline. Hey, I made it home. Staying with my mom. Went to the hospital, went to rehab, got a job. Because you cared about my dog, you cared about me. Still have my dog, still have my foot. Thanks. You never know. I thought that dog was the problem. He was the answer. Thank you.
All right, you all, first of all, where to begin? You all have your work cut out for you. They were all such terrific stories, 11 fabulous stories tonight. So I would like to do two things. I'd like to invite all the presenters down here to get your applause. I'd like everybody to vote. The voting is very easy. The voting is very easy. You have an index card. If you like number 1, write a 1. If you like number 11, write 11. If you like 6 or 8 or 7 or whatever, just write one number, send it down. Everybody was a winner tonight. What? Question? Yeah, absolutely. Keep the numbers as they are on the program. So Dr. Palamarchuk, whatever number he was, just ignore that number. Okay, 1 through 12. Keep the numbers as they are. Come on down. If your presenters want you vote, come on down. And while the judges are counting the votes, maybe we'll open it up to questions or comments for the group. I want to say what a fabulous job everyone did tonight. Wow. All right. Vote, vote, vote. Ladies and gentlemen, the voting, we've never had this before. It's an amazing thing. And here we go. We had a 3-way tie for first. A 3-way tie for first. We have 3 winners. But everybody got votes, and everybody truly is a winner here. Everybody did a fabulous job, and I thank you, and you make it great. The 3 winners are Jen Urich for front row seat, Rachel Smith for post-operation weight chart, and Christopher Goodwin for a guy and his dog. Congratulations. The prizes are nothing special. The prizes are a Temple Medicine hat and a Lewis Katz School of Medicine mug full of candy. All right. One big last round of applause for everybody. Thank them for coming. They're all fabulous. You all did a great job. Really, they did. They're very brave. Thank you all for your support. You know, I hope more of you will come down and do this next time. Thank you for coming. You know, some of the stories that were written will be on our website. All the stories will be on the website with a video. Thank you, guys. And you can come down and congratulate them. And thank you all for coming.